Hey, Flimsy Lunch Tray here, and today we're going to be doing another upgrade and commander build video, where we're going to be looking at the Tier 7 premium battleship from Germany, the Scharnhorst. In this case, Scharnhorst B, but the only difference is just the exterior camouflage, as I personally am a fan of the black. I know some people aren't, but I kind of like it. So, as we look at the Scharnhorst, I had a viewer actually... it's been too long, probably 3-4 weeks ago. Asked if I can do a video on something like Scharnhorst or Odin. And I was meaning to do this sooner, but the video schedule sometimes permits me from getting certain videos out sooner. So here we are looking at the Scharnhorst. So, in looking at the Scharnhorst, actually my plan is to build her differently, commander build-wise, than I would do with the Odin. And I can maybe briefly talk about why that is, because, you know, Odin and Scharnhorst don't necessarily play the same. So as you know, one of the first things we like to do when we talk about a ship is what type of ship are we discussing? So first and foremost, we're talking about a battleship, naturally, but the Scharnhorst kind of falls into an interesting category. As some of you know, that she kind of plays more like a battle cruiser. Not so much a battleship, but battle cruiser between her great speed, decent rudder shift time, and not the strongest of armor per se, especially on the sides, if you get a good side shot on her. Traditionally, I would say there's 3 types of battleships. Maybe there's like a specific names, I don't know, but I'm just going to use this terminology. Where the first category, I would say, you know, you have something like the sniping battleship. So tier 7, you know, they play best at range. They can move in medium range, of course, but they play better at range. You know, maybe something they were looking at, something like the Colorado, maybe the Strasbourg. Oh, why did I say the Strasbourg? That's the second category. But just they play better at range. They don't do well moving in and getting in close quarters. And then the second would be maybe a bit of a hybrid between a brawling battleship. That's kind of like the third category. You know, brawling and a sniping. It has the best of both worlds. And I think maybe there's where you'll find the Strasbourg, you know, with the main battery reload time. But at the same time, you know, Strasbourg doesn't do good brawling so much as like, you know, something like the Odin or even Scharnhorst does. But then Scharnhorst kind of, in a certain sense, falls outside those 3 categories in the sense that she's more of a battle cruiser. You kind of get that similar vibe with the Tier 9 Alaska. When I've played both of these, they kind of remind me of one another, but different still. So, in looking at the Odin, Scharnhorst, sorry, let's look at the ship, shall we? So when you purchase or you get the Scharnhorst in the armory or premium account online, her modules are stock, so there's nothing to upgrade there. But then when we look at upgrades, for the first slot, I like to take the main armaments modification 1. So this reduces the risk of the main battery in the torpedo tubes from becoming incapacitated by -20%. And then it boosts your main battery and torpedo tube survivability by 50%, which is really important with Scharnhorst because, as many of you may know, she also comes with torpedoes right here on the side, so it's often easy for them to get knocked out for reasons only known to wargaming. So it's good to have that. It also improves or reduces the repair time for the main battery in torpedo tubes if they should become incapacitated. So I prefer taking the main battery armaments modification. For the second slot, you've got damage control system modification 1 and engine room protection. I don't really ever find myself with the engine being knocked out, maybe such like as a destroyer. So I take the damage control system modification 1, which reduces the risk of fire and flooding. Reduces the risk of catching fire by -5%, and the risk of flooding by -3%. For the third slot, actually, I don't know why that's here. So I must have forgot. So I have on the aiming systems modification 1, which improves your main dispersion and main battery shells. But hey, Scharnhorst is a bit of a brawling build, if you will, being a battle cruiser. So I'm ashamed that I have that on there. So actually, I would recommend taking the second battery modification 1. And I have no idea why I had that one, because I seriously thought I had the secondary battery for modification 1, which boosts your secondary battery range by 7.6, and that's without the flag, and that's without a few other things as well. Because I don't have, as you can see, I have 7-point commander for my Scharnhorst. So I would recommend taking the secondary battery modification 1 because it improves your secondary battery firing range by plus 20%, and the dispersion of your secondary battery shells is reduced by negative 20%. So, the Germans really like to excel in the secondary category, especially with the post 0.10 commander rework. Wargaming gave the German battleships a bit of a buff on their secondaries before the rework came into place, so that helped them mostly keep all their secondary accuracy intact, where, in regards to the US battleships, they take a little bit more hit there on the commander rework side of things. So I would recommend taking here. Your main battery traverse speed is already really good. So if you look at that, was it 25 seconds? And just as an example, I have Lucian's on my Odin, and with his perk for him is that he gets the Grease the Gears, the enhanced, plus 25%, and that's 180-degree turn time. So that kind of helps you give something to compare it to. So they're really good already, in my opinion. And we'll get back to that in a moment. So I don't take the main battery traverse, main battery modification 2. You don't really want to worry about AA. You're tier 7. So hopefully you're more strictly tier 7 matchmaking speaking. And you want to just focus on the secondaries. For the fourth category, the fourth slot, I like to take damage control system modification 2 because it accelerates the fire extinguishing time and recovery from flooding by negative 15%, which when you're going to be more close up and fighting with other ships, it's nice to not burn or flood as long, especially if your damage control party is on cooldown and you're waiting for it to come back live. So this is why I take this. I still can't believe I didn't have secondary matter modification 1 on here. That's flimsy for you. That's all I can say. Okay, so let's look at the commander skills. All right, so right now I have the 7-point commander for the Scharnhorst. I'm only using 6 of those points thus far, and you can kind of see where we're starting at here. So let's begin, shall we? So for my recommendation, my opinion, for the first slot, you're going to want to take preventative maintenance, which reduces the risk of your main battery, your torpedo tubes, steering gears, engine becoming incapacitated by negative 30%, which is really nice because it syncs up well with the other main armaments modification, since it is possible for your torpedo tubes to get knocked out more than what you wish. But I've not had my main turrets knocked out too much, except if I'm bottom tier in random matchmaking. I'm versing tier 9 ships, so that's fun. And actually for the second, for your next 3-point commander, I like to take priority target. And this one has been a bit of a interesting topic for me, because originally this was a 1-point skill, now it's 2 points. And maybe I'll circle back to talking about more why I take priority target here shortly, because the other ideal option you could take would be Grease the Gears. But let me just circle back around to that because it kind of goes more involved with how the Scharnhorst plays. For a 6-point commander, then I take Adrenaline Rush next. So it reduces the main battery reload time, your secondary battery reload time, your torpedo tube reload time, and your continuous AA damage, as it enhances the ship parameters for each 1% of HP lost. And then after that, I'll probably would actually go for the long-range secondary battery shells, So it increases the secondary battery firing range by plus 20%. And now you can see that we've gotten up to 9.1 kilometers, right? So then if we hop out and we use the signal, being Mike Yankee Celsius, Sockets, I don't know how to pronounce that. Your secondary battery firing range is increased by plus 5%, and your secondary battery reload time is reduced by negative 5%, and your maximum dispersion of the secondary battery is by negative 5%. So then when we throw that flag on, we come back in here, we select that. Now our secondaries are 9.5 kilometers, so quite nice. And then after this, honestly, I would probably go for the improved secondary battery aiming. So the maximum dispersion of your secondary battery is reduced by negative 35%, and that's when you use the left mouse click and hold the control key in selecting a ship. Because again, the secondaries they're pretty good, especially when you have that secondary build going with Scharnhorst. After that, next I would go for fire prevention. So this reduces the risk of catching fire. The maximum number of fires on a ship is reduced to 3. So risk of catching fire is reduced by negative 10%, and the maximum number of fires is reduced by 1. So instead of getting 4 fires, you get 3 fires. And so let's talk about fire prevention expert for a moment. Because sometimes players get confused. I was confused about it for a little bit too. So without fire prevention, you get 4 fires on any ship, but you get 1 on the deck, you'll get 1 on or the bow, you get 1 on the stern, and then you get 2 burning on the superstructure here. But what fire prevention does, on top of reducing risk of catching fire by negative 10%, instead of getting 2 fires on the superstructure, you only get 1. Now, when you look at Scharnhorst as a Tier 7 battleship, her superstructure is actually kind of long. Especially, I was comparing the Scharnhorst's superstructure to the Colorado, and the Scharnhorst's superstructure is much longer than Colorado, right? So there's a difference there. So let me just go to port. So you kind of see the superstructure, pretty long, and then we jump over to, let's say, Colorado. Colorado's turret arrangement also kind of cuts into the superstructure, but you can tell it's not as long. The Colorado is just a bit more wider, so her superstructure is a bit more wider, but it's not as long. So for me, I find it easy to take fires on the superstructure just because it's so long, especially if you got destroyers or cruisers spamming you with HE. It doesn't take a whole lot to have 2 fires burning on your superstructure. So for me, I like to have that fire prevention going. At this point, we have just enough. I believe it's 4 points left. Yeah. There's 2 routes you could go with your last 4 points, and I'm going to tell you why I take what I take. So concealment right now is 15.2, and honestly, you want to take advantage of your secondary battery, 9.5 kilometers. So I like to get in and fight. So the concealment expert to me is just a wasted 4 points. So for myself, I intend to take close quarters combat. And so what close quarters combat does is it improves your secondary battery reload time. So the secondary battery reload time right now is 3.2 seconds. I take this, my secondary battery reload time drops down to 2.9 seconds. The second thing with close quarters combat is that can be activated is your main battery reload time. It gets dropped by negative 10%. So the reload time of the main battery right now is 20 seconds. And then if you activate it, which it's not going to show right now, but if you activate it and get within secondary range of other ships, it's going to drop from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. And that's not even including adrenaline rush. If your ship HP is lost, maybe you're looking more something like a 17 second reload time, right? It kind of reminds you of a quicker reload time of something maybe like a heavy cruiser, a battle cruiser, right? So for myself, the reason why I want to be a little bit more aggressive with Scharnhorst, because the other 4-point skill one could take is that you could take the emergency repair kit. And so what this does is the action time of your damage control party and your repair party consumable is increased by 10%. And then you also get an additional number of charges, which essentially for Scharnhorst here is we get additional heal. So instead of having 4 heals, you have 5 heals, as you can see right here. The reason why I'm a little bit more like I don't necessarily feel like I want to take the superintendent, or it's called something else now, yeah, emergency repair expert, is because it's not like the U.S., something like Massachusetts, where it's got a 40-second reload time. It has an 80-second reload time. So you might not be able to pump out all 4 heals within a battle by the time you go down. So for me, I would rather increase my attack skill. Now, another thing with Scharnhorst that personally for me as a player is that I like to play Scharnhorst in Narai a lot. And you're often within secondary battery range of a lot of the ships, enemy ships. So with having that, you get to increase your damage, which means more base XP earnings and a funner time overall in Narai. So that is why I lean more towards taking close quarters combat over emergency repair expert, now as it's called. So this would be my recommendation of a 21 point build commander. Now, I didn't really talk about priority target. So let me talk about that for a moment. Now, when I take Odin, as I say this right now, yes, my plan is actually, I'm not going to have priority target on Odin because you get the hydroacoustic search. With Scharnhorst, you don't get the hydroacoustic search. And for me as a player, I abuse priority target to no end. So especially if I'm fighting with 2 surface ships, they're all surface ships in the game, but say I'm fighting with a cruiser and a battleship, and I have the number 2, so there's 2 enemy targets are focusing me, but then I see this third keeps 3 2 3 2, kind of keeps going back and forth, and I know there's a destroyer around in the area. That tells me he's probably dumping torpedoes on me, and so from that I'll change the speed or the direction of my ship. Or if I think I know what direction the destroyer is in, maybe I face more towards the direction of where I think he might be at to hopefully negate any damage I'd take from torpedoes. The problem is, when you're in that type of situation, you don't just want to be, I think there was a destroyer dumping torpedoes on me right now. Let me just turn my ship and show broadside to the cruiser and battleship I'm fighting right now. Right? You don't want to do that. Just slow down and keep nose in on them, and hopefully you avoid those torpedoes. So for me, I've been really able to take advantage of priority target as a player in general. And it's something that annoys me so much if I don't have it. And that's why I'm a really sucker for it with... I've just kind of decided I have to take it on Massachusetts and Georgia now because it really helps my gameplay a lot. In those instances when, maybe you're just left with facing a destroyer and you're like, where is he at? And then you can tell if he's targeting you and dumping torpedoes on you as it goes between detected, one, targeting you, Now, if you're just straight up playing Scharnhorst and Narai in operations, you don't probably really need to take priority target. Then maybe you just take grease the gears to improve your main battery traverse speed. But personally for me, I do play Narai a lot with Scharnhorst, but I also like to take Scharnhorst into randoms, and it's just nice that I can use this to help know where, keep more of an awareness if there's destroyers possibly targeting me with torpedoes. So that's more of the 21 point build that I plan to take with Scharnhorst. Okay, so let's talk about why don't I take the other skills. Gunfeeder. I mean, your reload time is not terrible to begin with, right? 20 seconds, and then, if you're secondary range, you've got the close quarters combat activated with Adrenaline Rush. It's not the worst thing, because the HE and the AP is not really so bad, so it's really, oh, then I'll switch to HE, or if I know there's a destroyer coming. So for me, I just really don't, it's not a big concern of me when I am in the Scharnhorst. Then you have, if it shows me, Pyrotechnician, which just increases the chance of your main battery and secondary battery HE shells causing a fire. You would rather kind of be able to take your points elsewhere. So then that's why I don't take that. Consumable Specialist. You get, it's an attack skill where you get, a fighter consumable reload time is reduced, your spotting aircraft reduced, your defensive A reduced, your main battery reload booster consumable reduced, and your torpedo reload booster consumable reduced. So the only thing that really affects Scharnhorst here is either the fighter consumable or the spotting aircraft consumable, and you only get to choose one of those, so it's just not worth it. Emergency Repair Specialist. Back in the day, before 10.0, this skill and maybe this skill might make more sense, but, now it just doesn't in the current meta. So essentially, if you'd want to take, something like this 1-point skill, that means you've knocked yourself out of taking another 4-point skill and going up this ramp. But of course, you don't have to follow what I did over here if you want to still take a different type of setup. Then you have Incoming Fire Alert. I don't need it because you have Priority Target. Kind of just helps me be aware already that if I can expect shells inbound. At the same time, if you feel like you do really okay without Priority Target, then I'd say, yeah, sure, take your main battery traverse speed, because then your traverse speed right now, 180-degree turn time is 25 seconds. Take this bad boy. You've just dropped down to 20.8 seconds. So pretty good, quite nice. But for me, I'd rather just take Priority Target. But that's your call. Don't worry about IFHE. You're just going to reduce the chances of causing fire of HE shells when you take this. All it does is increases the armor penetration capabilities of your main battery HE shells and your armor penetration capabilities of your secondary battery shells. So, nah, not here. Vigilance. If I'm taking Priority Target, then for me, I don't need Vigilance. It just extends your torpedo acquisition range, and it's debatable how much more, this gives you a couple more seconds of reaction time. But for me, I'd just better off with Priority Target. AA Gunner, you're not really an AA battleship to begin with, so I don't recommend taking this skill. Super heavy AP shells. This is totally not worth it. This is a dumb skill. I don't know why Wargaming introduced it. Even though it increases the damage of your main battery AP shells, the fire extinguishing time and the flooding recovery time is increased by plus 30%. So that's a terrible skill. Just don't take it. We've talked about the long range secondary shells. We talked about Adrenaline Rush. Basics of survivability is nice as a defensive skill. But for me, I can't, if I take it, then that means I don't get to take one of these two valuable skills. So I'd rather go something like that. Even though this skill, the module restoration time, your fire extinguishing time, your flooding recovery time is all reduced. But you can usually do well if you cycle between your damage control party and your repair party to keep you going for longer. And you already have the damage control system modification 2 on top of the damage control system modification 1. And then you have enhanced anti-torpedo protection. So you get a damage reduction by 10% or plus 10% if you get hit by a torpedo. However, to me, I'd rather spend those 3 points elsewhere on something that would be even more valuable. Again, you're not an AA battleship, so don't worry about taking expert AA marksman. Don't take Deadeye. They're already changing this skill anyhow, as I record this after 0.10.2 update. Wargaming is planning at some time to change this. Actually, as today as I record this video, this is the deadline for them to kind of make more of an announcement about it, from what I understand, but they've been mute on it. So either they're going to nerf this skill or they're going to rework it entirely. So you're a German battleship, secondary battleship for brawling. Why would you want to take Deadeye, right? Don't do it. We talked about the improved secondary battery aiming. We've talked about close quarters combat, and we've talked about the emergency repair expert as that being an option if you feel like you'd rather improve your defense. You can swing that way. That's an option. Or if you want to be a bit more of a trolling build, I would say to a certain extent, then you can take close quarters combat. Again, when we talked about the concealment, most of the time you kind of want to be within secondary battery firing range of enemy ships, so then you just waste your 4-point concealment expert skill is just wasted. So you can better utilize that on something like emergency repair expert or close quarters combat. And we've talked about fire prevention expert. So in general, I do want to briefly touch on one thing in regards to the Scharnhorst. Let me just go into looking at her. Scharnhorst is a ship that does really well if she's top tier in matchmaking, or if it's strictly tier 7 matchmaking, but she will struggle regardless of what type of build you give her if you find yourself bottom tier in tier 9 matchmaking. As we know, matchmaking can be rather trollish, so if you're tier 7 and you're top tier and you're dealing with tier 5 and tier 6 ships, then Scharnhorst is just so much fun to play and abuse other players with. She does really well in combating destroyers and cruisers, but because her main armament, she's got these 283 millimeter guns. It doesn't have quite the same punch, something like the Colorado. So she struggles a little bit more when it comes to dealing with battleships, but that's why you have these torpedoes. And they have really great firing arcs too with the torpedoes. So it's something like, I think it's a line going out like from here, something like this. So it's actually really nice. You don't have to show a whole bunch of side to dump your torpedoes off. And that's kind of like when you go by a battleship and you just dump your torpedoes into them. Works really well because the range on those is 6 kilometers, and the maximum damage is 13,700, and just over a minute reload, so not too bad. But when it comes to strictly tier 7 matchmaking, she's still pretty fun to play. You won't be as OP per se, but then once you find yourself in tier 9 matchmaking, she's going to struggle a little bit, especially when you get to the tier 8, tier 9. You tend to find more of the HE spamming meta. So another reason why I think fire prevention works really well, to help prevent yourself from burning down if you find yourself in that type of situation. So I hope you found this video helpful. I look forward to doing more of these videos for you as well. I will touch on Odin sometime soon, as I build her a little bit differently than I do than the Scharnhorst when it comes to her commander builds, as I actually just got Lucian's, so I'm working on investing him, and I actually have been using him on the Scharnhorst just to try to get him his commander points higher, since it's going to take forever to get to 21 point skill. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you already subscribed, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And let me know what type of build maybe you take. Maybe you have a different build than what I was recommending here, and maybe you want to drop that in the comments and let other viewers know why you take the build that you do when it comes to Scharnhorst. So until next time, take care.